Hey everybody, Kris Gethin here, and welcome to another episode of the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. For you that are viewing this interview that I have now, you can check it out on my YouTube and the rest of the platforms, as you know, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. You are watching and listening to a very special guest that I have on today. His name is Siim. Now, I've been following this gentleman for several years now. I stumbled across his YouTube channel, which is phenomenal, very informative, but humorous at the same time. Definitely keeps you engaged. And I'd like to say I could watch his YouTube videos all day, but I think I probably already have. Not only that, this is a very good time for me to do this interview, actually, because I've just finished reading over 500 pages of his book, Metabolic Autophagy. So Siim, thank you ever so much for giving me your time today to educate my viewers and listeners.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm looking forward to the chat, and I'm glad that you like my content.
Awesome. It's great content. And, one of the things that really attracted me to you, Siim, is that, there's some great people within the space that I do respect a huge amount. One of the people that you just had on your show, I believe, because you have your own podcast as well, Dave Sinclair. And there's a lot of people out there in this space, and they put all this information out there on how we can improve our health span and our longevity, but not necessarily look the way that my demographic and my followers want to look. But when I come across people like yourself and Ben Greenfield, it's like, wow, these people look like they kick ass and lift a lot of weight as well. So, you resemble more like a bodybuilder,
Right.
a very young looking bodybuilder, I may say, because when I first stumbled across you, I was like, is this guy like 16 years old? But I think you're about 24, 25 years old now.
Yeah, I just turned 25, yeah, like a few weeks ago. So
Okay, so you look young. You're obviously doing something great for your health there. So I really wanted to talk about this metabolic autophagy, because I do have the book right here. The viewers can actually see. It is a very thick book, but I tell you what, it was an easy read because it had so much engaging information that I just wanted to take in. So I just got back from my bodybuilding and biohacking retreat, and every evening, even though I was kind of exhausted, I just dived my head into this book head first. And it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So you've authored quite a number of books now, and we'll talk a little bit about them, specifically your, keto for bodybuilders. But with metabolic autophagy, there's a lot of information in there, and autophagy and fasting is definitely one of the highlights that you apply. What made you want to come up with this book in particular, and who is it for?
yeah, like the process of autophagy has become pretty popular over the last few years, especially in the context of intermittent fasting and longevity. So I myself have been quite interested in it, but I kind of originated, or the reason I got into it had to do with just practicing a lot of intermittent fasting since my high school years. So back then I was lifting weights, got into gym and bodybuilding, and I wanted just to look at different strategies and, let's say, biohacks to burn more fat and get lean. So that's how I stumbled upon intermittent fasting, especially like people like Ori Hofmeckler and Martin Berkhan, these old OG fasters. And then I eventually realized that fasting is not only good for fat loss, but it's also amazing for the other longevity boosting benefits, such as it activates a lot of these anti-aging pathways, such as autophagy. Then there's things like sirtuins, phosphoproteins, and AMPK. All those things have this sort of a longevity boosting benefit, as well as a fat burning benefit. So when I realized that, or when I started to see that autophagy became more popular, then I wanted to kind of refute some of the misconceptions about it, because some people may think that it's the best thing ever, and they just want to activate it to the maximum all the time and never really go into the anabolic state. So which is not the case, actually. So I think I have this sort of the unique perspective in terms of coming from the background of bodybuilding and lifting weights, that autophagy, it is good for longevity, but at the same time, it's not like the most optimal thing for all the time. And maintaining muscle mass and being anabolic is also very good. So like you said earlier, some people in the longevity space tend to gravitate only towards being in this, anti-aging state and being in autophagy and being in ketosis all the time, which is good in the short run, but you definitely want to incorporate the other side of the coin, which is building muscle and maintaining it and stimulating the other anabolic processes that support this. So the book, in my opinion, is an attempt to kind of bridge this gap between building muscle and bodybuilding, as well as promoting your health span and potentially increasing your lifespan at the same time.
Yeah, interesting. From that from such a young age, when we're looking at what's online and magazines where we're told basically you should be signaling your mTOR pathway and it's just feeding windows, as opposed to, like you said, your FOX proteins, your sirtuins, and your AMPK, which that is more the cleanup, the autophagy, where in the bodybuilding circles we would just think catabolism. Catabolism can be good, but in bodybuilding circles, we're just thinking that is bad. So can you explain the ratio of, because, we know that the mTOR pathway can lead to the onset of early aging, but if, a lot of bodybuilders maybe don't want to care about that, but as I'm getting a little bit older, I definitely want to care about that. I want to live till I'm past 100 years old, but I want to kick ass and look like a bodybuilder in the process.
Yeah.
So, is this something that you follow every day? And how would you suggest somebody follow? Okay, you're generally eating 6 meals a day, generally, as a bodybuilder. But we have this starving window, which we think is just when we sleep. How do you talk to the bodybuilder about that? How they can extend that fast, but not become too catabolic where they're losing muscle, but they're catabolic enough to go through autophagy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, the thing is that the process of building muscle and having more muscle mass isn't necessarily going to mean that you're going to die sooner, so to say. There are plenty of people who are very skinny fat and they don't have any muscle at all, and they're constantly stimulating mTOR and they're constantly in this fat state and they're not activating autophagy. So there's a difference between looking big and having muscle versus stimulating this mTOR pathway all the time. So you can definitely build muscle and look awesome without overstimulating mTOR. So in my opinion, the key is in the balance, finding this balance on a daily basis where you stimulate both the aspect of building muscle with muscle protein synthesis, etc. But at the same time, you also go through shorter periods of fasting and suppressing mTOR as to allow your body to, not go into this overly stimulated mTOR state and stimulating autophagy in that state. So usually, I think some form of daily time restricted eating can help you to bridge this gap, so to say, that you can achieve the extended overnight fast, which will help you to kickstart some autophagy and even, suppress insulin, which is good for, indirectly, it can help you to become more anabolic later because you kind of experience a super compensation effect after you break the fast, so to say. So, and when you do break the fast, then you eat based upon your goals, so to say. If you're trying to build muscle, then you would have to support that growth with certain foods, such as, higher amounts of protein and carbs that they can be very useful for that. And then, incorporating some higher eating frequency can also be very useful, so to say, because it is true to a certain extent that if you eat more often, then you're going to build more muscle because you're stimulating the muscle protein synthesis more frequently. But at the same time, there's a point of diminishing returns with it. Like, you probably don't need to eat like 6 meals a day, but maybe 3 meals or 2 meals should be sufficient for most people, like unless they are having like bigger goals for going on stage or unless they are taking it more seriously, so to say. So most average people, the average gym lifter, they can definitely get away with just 3 meals or 2 meals, or even like in some rare cases you could pull off 1 meal a day, but it's quite difficult and it's definitely not like optimal for muscle growth. So usually fasting, extending some, like I think the most important part is to just relieve people from the obligation that they think they have to eat all the time and thinking that it's hurting themselves. Whereas in reality, these shorter periods of, quote unquote starvation or feeling some hunger and feeling this catabolism, that can actually have like a slightly longevity boosting benefit, so to say. So I think that's the biggest fear people have. They've been indoctrinated over the course of years that every time you skip a meal, then you're losing your entire gains and you're just wasting your time, which is not going to be true as long as your body is adaptable to it and as long as you're still nourishing yourself in the feeding phase, so to say. You're not going to lose muscle if your overall daily muscle protein synthesis balance is higher than muscle protein breakdown, so to say. You can still achieve a positive nitrogen balance by eating only 2 meals a day, as long as those meals are sufficiently high in protein and sufficiently high in calories.
Yeah, good answer there. You know, like what I've noticed specifically with people in my field, they just look at calories. They don't look at the source of those calories, you know, like if it's organic, humane raised, wild caught, etc. So, you know, not that sometimes their gut microbiome just isn't healthy. So even though they may be eating a lot of these foods, maybe they're not absorbing them all, maybe they're causing inflammatory responders, maybe they're getting stressed, cortisol levels are higher, as opposed to, hey, if I just worked on my cortisol levels, my gut microbiome, and then focused on, okay, it doesn't have to be so much meal frequency, because we get anxious, if we've gone outside and we've forgotten our cool bag and our Tupperware containers, which that's probably not going to put us in a good anti-catabolic state. Now we're stressed, So I've found, being at my body weight, I'm about 220 pounds at 5'8". Using fasting, controlled intermittent fasting is great for me. But like you said, if you've got somebody who wants to be a professional bodybuilder on a bodybuilding stage who's maybe 260 pounds, maybe doing this as frequently isn't going to be as good. Maybe once a week, maybe twice a week on non-training days could be applicable. But when you talk about the muscle protein synthesis, so sometimes what I do is what's called a controlled intermittent fast. So it may not be signaling autophagy as much, but it's great for empowerment and fat loss, where I won't necessarily have like branched chain amino acids throughout the day. And one thing I loved about your book is that you do talk about the supplements. You do talk about post-workout food that you should have. What about essential amino acids? I know there's BCAAs in there, but just in much smaller amounts. If you're going to like have a meathead jug like I have here with essential amino acids throughout the day until you break your fast to help you keep in a more of a anti-catabolic state. What's your view on that?
I think one of the misconceptions about autophagy is that it's almost like this on and off switch, that you're already going to inhibit it completely if you have like 1 gram of sugar or 1 gram of BCAAs. That's not like the real truth, because there is some form of basal autophagy happening almost all the time. Like the process itself is a vital component of healthy cell functioning, and it's the cells are being turned over on a daily basis all the time. And with in a fasted state, you're just ramping up this process a little bit more. And when it comes to the supplements of essential amino acids, then I would say that it depends a lot on what you're doing, as well as what's your overall energy balance. So autophagy is regulated primarily between the balance between mTOR and AMPK. So mTOR being the one that you stimulate when you're eating, and the BCAAs do stimulate mTOR a little bit by spiking insulin and IGF-1. But at the same time, fasting is also like a very potent activator of the opposite, which is AMPK. So, it depends a lot on the individual and what's their particular energy status in that particular moment, so to say. So if you are coming from an overnight fast, then your mTOR is already very low and your AMPK is pretty high. So taking like a little bit of BCAAs is probably going to lean you more towards the mTOR side, but I think it's not going to be enough of you to completely tip you over to the fully fed side, and it's not going to inhibit autophagy entirely. If it may be that it will inhibit autophagy, I think it's probably going to happen only for like a short period of time, where you will metabolize those BCAAs on those amino acids, because some of the BCAAs actually get converted into ketone bodies as well. And if you are particularly taking them in a fasted state, then chances are that they're just being burnt off as energy, and they're not going to affect a lot of the, the fasted physiology. Like you're going to still maintain a lot of the benefits of a fasted physiology, such as like a lower insulin and lower IGF-1, which in turn still promote autophagy. So if you even combine it with like going for a walk in nature while in a fasted state, then that already gonna pushes you back into the AMPK side more. Or like drinking a cup of coffee will also stimulate AMPK. So if you stack these things, you have to just it's just like a cool skill of becoming more aware of how different ingredients and how different activities move you in this scale between mTOR and AMPK. So like, yeah, in the morning, maybe you do a few jumping jacks or a few push-ups and then you drink those BCAAs, then it's going to have a much lesser of an effect than if you were to be completely sedentary. And furthermore, like someone who is your size, who has a bunch of more muscle mass and who is already metabolically flexible, then you can get away with even more. Versus someone who has like diabetes and insulin resistance, so to say. So it's very context dependent, and it varies a lot between people.
Interesting, yeah. And obviously the majority of my viewers and listeners here are active individuals. We're generally, hitting the gym 4 or 5 days a week, doing some form of cardio, I hope, every single day. And I actually wear like a blood glucose monitor, a 24-hour blood glucose monitor. I have the Libra on this side, and I also have the Dexcom on that side because I'm trying to compare both of them at the moment. But what I find is, and I know that you've discussed this, I believe it was on Dave Asprey's podcast, where we talk about various supplements that I take. So I've got a supplement myself, and it's called Clean Burn. And inside there is chromium, a chromate, and the Gymnema sylvestre, which helps regulate blood sugar levels. I also take the berberine, should I be having carbohydrates or anything like that, to help hopefully stimulate some form of autophagy there as well. Now, do you actually take these sort of supplements yourself? Do you take it mostly like with a carb meal, I assume? I'm assuming you're breaking your fast with carbs. So do you actually take them when you break your fast?
Yeah, like those are really good examples of like ingredients that do stimulate autophagy, like specifically berberine. It's a very potent anti-diabetic drug and lowers blood sugar and promotes AMPK and suppresses mTOR. So yeah, berberine definitely can lower your insulin in response to a meal. But I myself tend to take it when I'm fasting, so to say. I take it in a fasted state. And this quote unquote can like speed up the process of fasting, so to say. I can go into autophagy faster because I'm like suppressing my mTOR much more and I'm stimulating AMPK with that. So an example like I gave earlier, like a cup of coffee can do the same. So berberine is like coffee on steroids and when it comes to autophagy. And other examples are also like, green tea. You mentioned chromium, that's awesome. Then turmeric, cinnamon, ginger, all these like adaptogenic herbs, medicinal mushrooms, apple cider vinegar, they all stimulate the process of autophagy a little bit by lowering your insulin and stimulating AMPK. So yeah, like I definitely combine them together on some days with my food, but for instance when I'm resting, or I may take them like in a fasted state as well to kind of speed up the process.
That's cool. Yeah, I do take those before I go to sleep as well, hoping that it's going to put me in a little bit quicker. Because sometimes what I personally do is if I'm following like a keto lifestyle, I'll personally follow like a cyclical keto, much like what Ben Greenfield does, where I'll usually have my carbohydrates at night before bed. Maybe I'll have some fruit, maybe I'll have some oats, some sweet potato, and then before I do go to sleep is generally when I'll have that, maybe have some apple cider vinegar, help stabilize those blood sugar levels and, like you said, get into autophagy a little bit quicker. Now, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that you will fast for about 20 hours as opposed to the usual 16-8 for about 20 hours. Is that correct?
Yeah, like on most days I do, and that's somewhat of called the warrior diet or 1 meal a day or something. Like if I'm having a rest day or a cardio day or easy like walking day, then I'll just primarily eat one meal. But it's not like one meal; it's more like a feast over the course of 3 to 2 hours or something like that, so to say.
Right, got it. So what about on your? Well, number one, what is your weight training? What does your weight training week look like at the moment? And for how long will you fast on those particular days? And what do you break your fast with?
I try to do some form of exercise basically every day, but my actual resistance training days I do it like a full body workouts every other day. Like one day I'll do calisthenics full body. The second day is a rest day. Third day, I may go to the gym to do weights, and like that. I do like try to do like more cyclical and combine both resistance training with weights as well as calisthenics. And usually on the rest days, I do like go for a bike ride or swim in the lake or something. So pretty active, but at the same time, on those days I still eat maybe like actual calories within like 4 hours or so, and I fast around 20 hours. So the way I pull it off is that I consume some of the calorie restriction and autophagy boosting mimetics in the fasted state around, like 16 hours or so, like drinking some cup of coffee. I may take like some berberine on some days, some ashwagandha, some turmeric, those things. And I may have like a cup of bone broth as well to just give myself some calories and energy. Then on the actual workout time, I'm consuming like a protein shake, like basically a regular whey protein shake, which is the idea is to just mitigate the catabolism that occurs during training, especially if you're fasting, so to say. So fasting is catabolic. You will break down more of your muscle if you're working out fasted versus fed. And if you're I'm just kind of lazy in a sense that I don't want to eat during the day, and I prefer eating like a big, massive dinner. So I'm taking the protein shake during the workout to slow down the catabolism or protect against the catabolism and stimulate muscle protein synthesis during that time. But that's the main idea of how I do it. So I consume the shake during the workout, and it's going to give me like basically a boost in physical performance and protects against muscle loss.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Right. So pretty much a lot. I noticed that a lot that you do is kind of cyclical as well. So are you're
Right.
following? Because I know that you've got a book that we could talk a little bit about on keto bodybuilding. So there's a lot of people out there now wanting to maybe get away from carbohydrates. Obviously, some people are becoming, even within my industry, are becoming a little bit more insulin resistant. They can't lose the body fat that they once did, blaming it on their age, and resetting themselves with keto. So you're following a strict keto or cyclical keto, and how often are you knocking yourself out of ketosis?
Right. I definitely follow more of a cyclical keto type, and I usually have like at the moment I'm having like a carb up day maybe twice a week. One being like a smaller carb up, and the second one being like a higher carb day. And the idea is that it's basically going to be useful for maintaining progress at the gym, as well as like stimulating increasing leptin and breaking metabolic adaptation, etc. So I think it's never a good idea to keep your body in this single state all the time. You do want to have variation as to maintain more metabolic flexibility, and as well as go through different pathways such as autophagy versus mTOR and etc. So I usually do the cyclical keto diet. On the days I eat keto, I'm not like very strict keto, like I'm not counting my carbs, because I already know that I'm going to be kicking myself out of keto within the next few days anyway. So I'm not going to be neurotic about restricting all of my carbs or eating a bunch of fat. So I'm just eating vegetables, plenty of protein, and some healthy fats. That will be like my low carb keto day. And on the days I do eat carbs, I will do like the opposite, where I'll be eating low fat, higher carb, and still sufficient protein, so to say, because I don't want to be like, the worst diet would be high fat, high carb, because that's like the recipe for insulin resistance and binge eating, like, which is just like the Western American diet.
Yeah, interesting. So I'd like to get into that a little bit. So if somebody is out there, and my fiance Sybil, who you just spoke to a second ago, she really wants to go into a form of fat loss diet where she's not going to get all these cravings. And she's attempted keto before, but I think it's a little bit difficult for her to get past that phase to become keto adaptive without dealing with all these cravings, because she's not getting any carbohydrates all of a sudden.
Right.
If you were to, because I know you do a lot of coaching as well with all types of athletes and individuals, if you were to get somebody from a typical carbohydrate rich diet into a keto or fat adaptive diet, how would that process would like? Would you start with a fast to get them into ketosis first? Would you start looking at other ketone bodies and maybe some sort of keto salts to get them in? How does it look?
Right. Well, it definitely has to like depend a lot on the individual and what's their preference and how do they like to eat, because I don't really want to enforce a 3-day fast on someone who doesn't want to do it or someone who isn't ready to do it, so to say, because it is true. if you're used to eating more carbs and you're used to not fasting, then it's going to be pretty difficult. So the process where it gets easier to fast and the process where you're not really craving for those sweets and carbs is almost is like a fat adaptation process. And the way you build that is with three things primarily. Those are intermittent fasting, restricting your carbs with a keto diet, and exercise itself can also promote fat adaptation, like primarily cardio exercise. So all those variables can be played around with, but I think the initial process of how you do it, I would start off with things like I mentioned earlier, where Ben Greenfield is backloading all of his carbs into the dinner, and he's eating basically low carb keto during the daytime, and he's eating carbs at night. So that's a form of a cyclical keto diet within the parameters of a 24-hour period. So you're still experiencing higher rates of fat oxidation during the daytime, and you're experiencing milder ketosis and milder autophagy during the daytime, and in the evening you're eating carbs to kick yourself out of ketosis and still maintaining your performance and sanity at the same time. So this is a form where most regular people who aren't die hard for keto, who aren't able to, or who aren't just willing to go for the restrictive diet, they can just start off with something like carb backloading, which I've tried in the past myself, and it's very effective. So I think that it's actually something like regular people who aren't into exercising should eat, who aren't willing to go for keto. And then maybe like on some days, if you really want to curb those cravings, then extending the fasting window on some days can be useful for going for maybe like the 16 and 8 type of fasting. And a lot of people do say that on a 3-day fast they lose their cravings completely, and they're gonna reset their taste buds, which I agree as well. Like I do experience that it does happen, but it's again it may backfire in a sense as well for some people who aren't just used to fasting, or they have like this, or they get stressed out from fasting that easily. So it has to depend on the person, but the starting point would be carb backloading, in my opinion, to kind of build up this fat adaptation, and then maybe going for a cyclical keto diet where they eat only carbs once a week or such, and definitely like keeping the daily intermittent fasting in some shape or form is just so convenient, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, interesting. All right, so if somebody, if my viewers and listeners are dealing with cravings, even though they're eating carbohydrates, however, they're eating sweet potatoes, rice, quinoa, oats, but they're always craving something sweet or maybe something savory, but that is right. Full of carbohydrates. Would you then suggest that they go onto a keto lifestyle? So they're, because a lot of people, as in the bodybuilding industry, generally go low fat when they go higher carbohydrates. So their brain doesn't have the cholesterol or the hormonal function needed to think correctly. These people aren't always good people to be around. And we know why, especially when dieting for a bodybuilding competition or trying to lose body fat. Is that when you suggest, okay, let's go keto and let's just reset everything, give the brain and the body and the hormones what it needs, and we'll follow this lifestyle for a while?
I do think that keto diet is very effective for lowering cravings and resetting your taste buds, but I don't think it's necessary in a sense. You can achieve like a similar result with like a somewhat of a paleo type of diet as well. And I think the most important thing is to just reduce the processed sugar and processed carbs and the hyper palatable foods that tend to just make the person want to overeat, and you can get like a very similar result. So the problem isn't necessarily like that carbs are bad or sugar is bad. It's also the problem that people tend to have. Like it's you can be very healthy and you can have like a very good relationship with food if you practice things in moderation, so to say. Even with fasting, like I think people definitely need to learn how to go through periods of hunger and not eating, but at the same time they also need to teach themselves how can they practice moderation when they're eating, so to say. Because I think it's I myself wouldn't mind never eating a piece of bagel or a cake ever again. I don't mind it but I do have it every once in a while because it's enjoyable. And I think it's can actually teach you to be more disciplined and have more self-control. Because imagine if you are on a very strict keto diet for months and months on end, then you maybe have like just one piece of cake, and then you're going to go off the rails completely, and you're going to binge, and have this massive rebound. That's not like the ideal position where I would want to be, and that's not what I recommend either. I would much rather teach the person how can they practice more self-control, and that part has to include, having these, carbs and in some aspects. And of course, if someone is having some bigger difficulties with cravings, then a short, quote unquote, mini detox from sugar by going on keto can be useful and definitely effective. But I would much rather, eventually I would much rather keep some carbs still in there, just so the person could be, more disciplined.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, like you said, it's that cyclical approach. And what other contributing factors are there out there? Because one of the things that I do talk about a lot is in regards to light. I've had Andy Mant on the show from Blue Blocks. I've got Matt Maruka on the show this week. I know there's a lot more artificial light out there than it once was. We tend to be staying up later, especially here in the US. When I first moved, I moved to India for a while, and then I came to US, and people are asking me if I want to go out for a coffee at 9 o'clock at night, and that's when I usually go to bed, being from a farm in Wales. But people tend to be up later, they're exposed to artificial light, and then, when they're on these darn devices in their bed, obviously they're exposing themselves to more light, more EMFs, and sedating the onset and the creation of melatonin, so they're sleeping less. And I find a lot of these people are, a lot of clients are getting more cravings because of it as well. Is this something that you've noticed?
Yeah, it's true. So to say, there's a lot of research showing that sleep deprivation and poor sleep increases leptin, it decreases leptin, so to say, that increases cravings, and it also increases ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and it also makes it harder for you to lose weight by lowering your testosterone and lowering fat oxidation and lowering muscle, so to say. So there's definitely it's very important to get enough sleep, and especially deep sleep, for both longevity and health span, and as well as fat loss and muscle growth, so to say. So sleep is the most overlooked aspect of health and vitality. And even the process of autophagy gets mostly stimulated when you're in deep sleep. And that happens in conjunction with growth hormone, so to say. When you're going to bed, then the natural pulse of growth hormone rises around like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And this is where melatonin tends to rise as well, as long as there's no like blue light in your environment. So that's the natural human circadian rhythm that should follow the day and night cycles of the planet and the sun. So in the evening or at nighttime, you definitely would want to avoid the artificial blue light, as well as anything else that may just keep you stimulated and wakeful in the evening. So if your goal is maximal fat loss, and as well as just circadian alignment and health, then shifting your bedtime a bit earlier rather than later is probably like a better idea, because humans tend to be, or most humans are, diurnal creatures. We're not like nocturnal creatures. And some people may say that they're a night owl. Well, the reason they are a night owl has to do with the circadian disruption that they've experienced, and that they've self-induced, so to say. If you were to be put into a tent in the middle of a forest, then you would naturally, after a week, you would start to sleep according to the sun, so to say. You would wake up with the sunrise and go to bed at sundown. So humans would naturally gravitate towards these circadian rhythms. The problem is just we have so many disruptors like blue light, social media, television, and those things just derailing us.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I moved to Boise, Idaho. I was living in LA prior to that. Is that I just love camping. I love the outdoors. I love the trails, mountain biking, and whenever I camp, it's no coincidence you have the best night's sleep. Even though you're not in a real comfortable bed, you just have the best night's sleep because you're away, like you said, away from a lot of these EMF rays and artificial light, and you get the fresh air and the natural sounds. And we're always trying to get as close to our ancestral design, as it were. However, you see so many people within the biohacking space trying to go for that icing before the cake. They're not, looking at what they can do. That's the low-hanging fruit. That is free. That's go out there and get the natural sunlight to earth yourself, to, fast, because, that's what our hunters and gatherers did. They fasted. They didn't have the abundance of food, especially here in the US, that's being marketed to themselves. But let's say, like for me personally, I only used to get 3 hours sleep a night. And I was one of those warriors that would work all day and out-train everybody and pat myself on the back for burning the candle at both ends. But then I went to Dr. Spanaug's clinic back in 2014 because I exhausted absolutely every opportunity, everything that I could explore to hack my sleep. Because I didn't like the person that I was becoming because of it. And since then, I was having various IV therapy 5 days a week. I was having colonic hydrotherapy several days a week. I went on like a fasting protocol and veganism or all sorts. And I had to work on myself since then, every single day, much like yoga, much like meditation. You have to work at it every day. But now I'm up to like 6 hours sleep. Not the best, but my quality of my deep sleep is there. But I do the low-hanging fruits. I've got an infrared sauna here. I get in a sauna 5 times a week. I have the cold therapy. I have a cattle trough there that I fill up with ice. And I have the BioBalance PEMF. I take the CBD. I have the blue light blocking glasses, etc., etc. But still, my deep sleep is down. Is there, my REM is great. My REM is great. And I do quantify it with my Oura Ring. I have a bio strap as well, just to make sure that everything's correct. What suggestions do you have for somebody to hack their deep sleep, which, like you said, is going to help with fat loss and muscle growth, evidently?
Right. How much deep sleep are you getting?
It could range anywhere from, say, 2 minutes to 31 minutes on a very, very, very good night. Where I have another friend who does none of this stuff whatsoever. So I think, by looking at your book, it's probably genetic, where, he won't do any of these things and maybe he'll only get 4 hours sleep, but 2 hours sleep of that is deep sleep.
Right. Well, I think it might be that your ring is just misinterpreting some of the data, so to say. So I've noticed also on the Oura Ring that there are like 2 groups of people. They either get a bunch of REM and no deep sleep, or the opposite. They get a bunch of deep sleep and very little REM. So I think the ring may be just categorizing your total deep sleep and REM sleep into the one group, so to say, because those 2 phases happen almost simultaneously, like they follow each other. So you go from deep sleep right into REM sleep. So it may be that the ring is just gathering all the information from deep sleep and putting it into REM sleep. So maybe like I may suggest testing some other tracking devices to see what's maybe like correlations. And if you do get like the similar results on other devices, then some things that can help with deep sleep especially are some like magnesium and these other adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha I tend to have in the evenings. Reishi, they can just lower the sympathetic arousal, which will help you to go into deep sleep. But at the same time, like you mentioned, if you're feeling, if you don't notice any of the negative side effects, then that's not like a big problem either, so to say. So they do say you need to get like 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but the quality of those hours is a lot more important. And you can essentially speed up this process again by, having, the most optimal sleep ever and being fully recovered. So I myself also sleep usually like 6 to 7 hours, and I'm getting plenty of deep sleep. I'm getting usually like 2 to 3 hours of deep sleep a night, and
I'm
1
jealous.
to 2.
I'm so jealous.
Well, I think like I may be more young in terms of my body's ability to produce melatonin and such, but at the same time, like I do all the the optimization as well, like the blue blocking glasses, and I'm using like the chili pad that lowers the temperature of the mattress. Then I have like some EMF protection, and those sorts of things. And I think if you're not really noticing any of the negative side effects, then it's not maybe a big issue, because the ring may just misinterpret some of the data. And I would much rather look at the deep sleep and REM sleep combined rather than separately, because I know that both of them are very much similar. Like a deep sleep promotes physical repair and muscle growth and fat loss and autophagy, those sort of things. And REM sleep is more of like the psychological repair and brain memory consolidation and those sort of things. So they are interlinked. But if you're getting like a whole lot of REM sleep and no deep sleep, then it may be that you're just getting both of them is misinterpreted in some aspects.
Okay, all right. Well, I do take like the KSM-66 adaptogen, the ashwagandha, and I have the reishi from Organifi that I supplement with as well. But what you said was fascinating. That maybe I should be, because I get a lot of REM. Maybe I should be looking at combining them. So, is there another way that you quantify as well, other than your Oura Ring, or do you use exclusively the Oura Ring?
I've been using this thing called the Dream Headband, which is it's a novel, it's a pretty new device, and it's like an EEG home device, which I've noticed that it does give me like a slightly different result. It gives me a little bit more REM rather than deep sleep, but I'm still getting pretty high numbers for both. So the Dream Headband also helps to create this sort of a sleep architecture. It creates this sort of a profile for you, and looking at how do you sleep every night, and then creates these different patterns in terms of your what time do you go to bed, how much deep sleep you get on that night, etc., etc. So it's like a coach, almost like an AI coach that can help you to give like more feedback. So that's something that can be useful for treating like sleep disorders like insomnia or sleep apnea.
Yeah.
But like I've used both. So on a regular basis, I'm just using the Oura Ring because it's convenient. But the Dream Headband would be something that's useful for like identifying certain problems.
Okay, all right. Well, I've written that down. I'll put the link to that in the show notes, and obviously everything else that we discussed. So I just want to go into the fasting a little bit, because I've been fascinated by it after reading Metabolic Autophagy, because a lot of it that you put in there is specifically for the person who works out, that is active. Okay, so you go for like 20 hours. Somebody like myself, like I said, around 220 pounds at 5'8", would you suggest a 20-hour fast for myself on the days that I do fast? Or would you tend to steer towards maybe more a 16-8 or 15-7?
Well, I would think that on a daily basis, you should definitely extend your eating window and have more meals, because you probably need them for the workouts and the muscle hypertrophy. So at minimum, overall, I wouldn't suggest anyone to have more. I wouldn't recommend people to spend more time in a fit state rather than in a fasted state, so to say. So there are 24 hours in a day. You wouldn't want to be in a fit state for 15 hours and fasting only for 9 hours, because that's what the research also shows, that the standard Westerner, starts their eating window right in the morning by just putting some milk in their coffee or having a bagel, and they go through the entire day being in this fit state by having, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with some snacks, etc. And even they stop their eating window immediately before going to bed by having a snack or something. So they're never really going into the fasted state. So to counteract that, you would want to make sure that you're more on the side of spending more time in a fasted state. And for the minimum for that would be 14 hours of fasted and 10 hours fed. And that's also coincides with the research by Dr. Sachin Panda, who is doing a lot of research about time-restricted eating and the circadian rhythms. So he also suggests that this sort of a pattern where you're fasting for at least 14 hours, 16 hours is the optimal diet for the circadian rhythms, because then you have this short period in the morning where you're fasting a little bit, but you also stop eating a few hours before bed and allowing your body to go into or to start producing melatonin, etc. So you're not disrupting your sleep. So yeah, generally any person, I would suggest they should fast for 14 hours every day and eat their food within 10 hours. This is the bare minimum. for what humans are designed to be. But if you're trying to optimize more for autophagy and those sort of things, then you would probably have to fast for like 16 hours or such to get like the minimum effect. And then like, you can biohack this process a bit faster by, going for a morning walk in the morning, taking a sauna or taking an ice bath, doing some easy cardio or something. All those things, they will speed up the process where you can go into autophagy. And exercise itself is also like a very potent stimulus of autophagy, like probably the best one after fasting. So heavy resistance training, even if you have eaten something before, if you're really pushing it and if you're doing like some HIIT or something, then you will still experience some autophagy in the post-workout scenario, so to say. So you're not really missing out on those things as long as you're very physically active. So metabolically flexible people tend to tap in and out of ketosis faster, and they also would tap into autophagy faster as well. So you can definitely be like more physically active without needing to fast that long and still get a lot of the benefits. Right. And on some days, on like for if you want to maybe quote unquote clean more house and when you're like resting, you don't have like a hard workout, then on those days, fasting for maybe 20 hours or maybe 24 hours is also like a good idea. So, maybe a few times a week or a few times a year, you would maybe have like more of an extended fast where you have like a 48-hour fast or a 3-day fast. But I wouldn't suggest that going beyond that is not going to be like that much beneficial, because autophagy will hit the point of diminishing returns eventually, and especially if you're working out and such. So I myself tend to have like a 3-day fast at least once a quarter of the year, but this year I've already had like six of them. So at the moment I'm not trying to have like another long fast. I'm just maintaining and doing the daily time restricted eating. That makes sense.
That must take a lot of mental strength and empowerment to do something like a 3 or 4 day fast. I should imagine. Right. But going.
Yeah, I usually have them when I'm like traveling, so it's very convenient. Like I'm not gonna want to eat like airport food or Subway or something. So I'd much rather fast and I get like a fast in. So it's very convenient when you're on an airplane and you're not even moving around. So it's like a really easy hack.
Yeah, that's what I absolutely love doing that, because I travel a lot internationally and I find that I get straight back into the time zone. My circadian rhythm resets very, very quickly if I fast on that travel. Try to have my meals set for the time zone that I'm going into, and like just do the usual things. Like I try to wear like a Defender Shield blanket up to the neck and earth myself as soon as I get there. But fasting, I found, has had a huge effect on doing that with travel. Now, could you just touch on a couple of the studies that are out there for all of my listeners that are thinking, hey, there's no way that I can fast for 15, 16 hours and put on muscle. I know there are some studies that have referred to like, what effect it has on like your growth hormone levels, your testosterone levels, etc. Could you touch a little bit on that so my listeners can kind of understand what is happening from a hormonal or cellular level that will allow them to continue to improve their performance, even though they're not having those same meals spread throughout the day, they're having them in a shorter eating window that will allow them to continue to pack on muscle or burn fat, as it were.
Right. Well, what determines muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth is, first of all, you have to have like the right stimulus. You have to train hard to signal the body that it needs to build muscle. And secondly, you need to have sufficient protein synthesis, which is the building of muscle tissue. And you stimulate muscle protein synthesis by eating protein. And the studies come where it shows that you stimulate, the more frequently you stimulate muscle protein synthesis, the more muscle you're going to build. So it is true that it will stimulate anabolism and mTOR, etc. But at the same time, I would imagine that having slightly fewer meals wouldn't have like you may experience the process a bit slower, but eventually the end result isn't going to be that different, so to say. So on a daily basis, on a 24-hour basis, what determines muscle hypertrophy is the balance between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. So when you're fasting, you're breaking down muscle, and when you're eating, you're synthesizing muscle protein. And with that, you can still achieve a positive muscle protein synthesis balance by getting enough of the protein within a shorter time frame. And even if you're eating like 2 meals a day, then you can still spike muscle protein synthesis. It's definitely not as anabolic as eating 6 meals a day, but at the same time, it may be worth it when it comes to the longevity aspect and anti-aging. So it's, again, like it depends on the person and their particular goals. So you probably wouldn't experience as massive gains if you were to be eating 6 times a day, but if you're eating like 2 meals or 3 meals, then you can still get away with it as long as the protein intake is sufficiently high, and those the food sources are also high quality. Then there are also some other aspects of fasting that not directly help with muscle growth, but they will definitely help with preventing muscle protein breakdown. So you mentioned growth hormone. It is true that fasting will elevate growth hormone quite substantially, but growth hormone isn't going to make you build muscle. It's more of like an anti-catabolic hormone that protects against muscle protein breakdown, and it promotes fat loss. So part of the reason why people like they fear that they're going catabolic is that their body is like under-adapted to periods of catabolism, and they're so used to burning, the glycogen that they have, and they're never actually haven't experienced the aspects of catabolism, so to say. So catabolism and fasting are like hormetic stressors as well that strengthen the body in a way, and the more fat adapted you are, the more used to fasting you are, the less catabolism you're going to experience with it as well, versus someone who is only like a sugar burner. They're going to definitely experience more catabolism because they're not used to fasting. And even autophagy, people, common sense says that autophagy breaks down muscle, which is true, but it's almost like a recycling process that can actually protect against sarcopenia later in life. So it's another example of hormesis, that your body gets used to the stressor, and the part of the reason why that stressor becomes overbearing is that you haven't experienced it that much, so to say. So keeping some form of daily time restricted eating into your day, that can just like enhance your muscles in a way that they become more resistant towards muscle catabolism. And while you're eating, you still stimulate. So you tend to be you have to definitely like flip the switch in terms of making sure that you get enough calories, and you're making sure that you get enough protein, so to say. So if you're eating, kale and bok choy after breaking a fast, then you're definitely going to lose muscle because you're not going to stimulate mTOR, so to say. So the way I look at it is that I want to experience more of the extremes, so to say. I want to experience periods of fasting, but I also want to experience periods of higher anabolism and higher mTOR. So that's why, having some carbs plus protein can be very more anabolic than doing just keto with protein.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And what I found that works as well with a lot of people, specifically that are bodybuilders. Okay, maybe complete autophagy, cleaning house, isn't going to be their primary purpose, but they want to have that sense of empowerment. They want to have that sense of discipline, and they want to burn fat at the same time. Right. And what I found is during that fasting window, they're like, okay, I still want to build muscle. I still want to burn fat. I found that taking not branched chain amino acids, in their condensed singular form, but having like essential amino acids, because the studies have actually shown that having like essential amino acids, like a scoop of essential amino acids I actually have in my product, will signal muscle protein synthesis, the equivalent of like 20 grams of whey protein isolate. So I find when they actually sip or drip feed themselves with the essential amino acids, that gives them a little bit more energy. It gives them the fortitude of thinking, okay, right, I can continue to build muscle here and burn fat and fast at the same time. I can get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, like the psychological effect of this thing is definitely there. And even like, I think there are some case studies where people like swish just like some sugar water in their mouth without actually swallowing it, and they experience a performance boost because it may raise their insulin, or it may just promote the release of glucose into the bloodstream or something. So yeah, they're definitely like even if you do experience this taste of the essential amino acids, or even like a cup of coffee, all those things can help you to get through the fast, and indirectly they can just make you more motivated to train harder or something.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much for your time, Siim. So there's a special that you told me at the beginning of this podcast, which is absolutely phenomenal. I had to ask you twice if it was correct. But metabolic autophagy that I have here, as you can see, it's like well over 500 pages. You have a lot of references in this book as well, which is phenomenal. A lot of references. And you are going to be giving this to our listeners and viewers for free. All you have to do is pay for shipping. That's correct? I've got that correct?
Yeah, people have to just pay for the shipping and printing costs, and they can get it for free. So there is a small cost for the shipping, but basically the content is going to be free. And you can get it at my website, siimland.com.
Siimland.com. Okay, and we will put that link in the show notes. I'll also put a link in there as well to where people can find you online. But if you could just let us, because I know not everybody is going to look at the show notes, if you could let us know the name of your social platforms, particularly your YouTube, which I highly, highly suggest. So much awesome information there. If you could provide that to us, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, please, Siim.
Yeah, definitely. Like I'm gonna be Siim Land on all the social media platforms on YouTube and Instagram. So my biggest platform is YouTube, but I also do content on Instagram.
Okay, and you also offer coaching as well, nutritional plans, training plans, and everything that I will link to in the show notes as well. So thank you ever so much for your time. You're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Your contribution to the space is definitely becoming more and more noticed by people, including myself. So thank you very much, sir.
Well, thanks for having me, and glad to talk with you.
All right, thank you.